Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. Joined again here with Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Aaron, going very well.
Well, we have previously spoken about the topic of interdependency and staying on the flavour of superannuation and death benefit payments. We thought we'd have a look at the area that is also driving a lot of conversation in our technical updates, and that is around the timing of benefit payments around superannuation death benefits and the fact that we have the difference between a member benefit versus a death benefit. And this is an area where we are seeing again very different circumstances arising, but in this context with APRA regulated funds versus self-managed funds. So Tim, maybe to get you to set the scene a little bit here around why this is such a big issue.
Yeah, and look, I think it's an area that since we've been working together, Aaron, we've sort of probably late 2022 was where we first sort of started to see the tax office coming out about this issue, and I guess the reality is that we put such a great emphasis on estate planning,
Yep.
And so therefore part of that estate planning is should we take money out of super, should we leave money in super, look at the tax-free and taxable components of it. And so, therefore, with someone with a highly taxable fund and potentially no tax dependence, is certainly going to be far more interested in withdrawing their benefits out once they're over the age of 60 to get a non-assessable, non-exempt income versus having that death benefit payment, which might attract on the tax element that 15% plus Medicare if paid directly to the non-tax dependent. So I guess the relevance really is that there could be a fair amount of tax at stake.
Yep.
Differentiating between a member benefit and a death benefit.
Yeah. So when someone becomes ill or they're on their deathbed,
Yep.
this is when this issue gets heightened much further.
Yeah.
And the undated document in the drawer or something is really coming into question here. And the ATO takes a very particular view, it now appears, when it comes to SMSFs.
Yeah, that's right. And let's be very clear, they have probably always taken a view to the undated documents sitting in the
Yes,
desk.
they have.
And that is an absolute no-go zone anyhow.
Yep.
But where it's becoming far more relevant is where activity has commenced. And so a genuine request has been made by the member to pay the benefit out. What we are ultimately seeing almost exclusively, well, I shouldn't say almost exclusively,
Yep.
is that where the situation arises in a self-managed super fund, the ATO has indicated in every instance via private binding ruling that it will be treated as a death benefit.
Yep.
And where we have seen the almost exact circumstances laid out in an APRA fund, that the ATO have determined that they are member benefits.
Yep.
And the key issue in both sets of circumstances is the trustee's knowledge of the death of the member.
Yep. And to that point, we don't necessarily have the full understanding of the relevant determinations that the ATO has done based upon the facts within these PBRs, but we will see some differences around potentially whether it's a cash payment in specie. Interestingly, one that we touched on in our Changing Face of SMSF recently looked at the issues of, and the referencing to the fact that you need to look to your governing rules of the fund. Yet in the commentary, the ATO didn't get any documentation around the governing rules or the information pertaining to it. And the context of that one was, well, it should have been paid earlier, it didn't, there was some missed payments and so forth. But the common theme has always been, as soon as there's an awareness to this issue by those involved in respect to the member's death and the fact that this may have started previously, but we're now in a position where the payment has occurred, even though it's gone into the member's bank account, it's in essence too late.
Yeah, and I think the key to that is, and one of the things within that determination that we spoke about was the ATO used the word, we assume that the governing rules made references to these things. And of course, we know what they say about anyone that assumes. But the key, I think, too, is that in all these instances, we're talking about cash payments. And I think, as you referenced before, like the concept of in specie, we've been down this path, and we've been down this path for a long time with in specie. When is an in specie contribution made?
Yep.
And of course, once you define when an in specie contribution is made, you are setting a precedent for when an in specie benefit is paid, and that is the concept of beneficial ownership and the transfer of beneficial ownership. And where beneficial ownership is questionable, then you revert to legal ownership. And legal ownership is obviously when the documentation confirms the new name of the ownership. But beneficial ownership occurs when the executable form is fully executed, so dated and signed by all the relevant parties.
May need to be stamped.
May need to be, but so therefore the receipt of the off-market transfer form, right, fully completed, is sufficient from a contribution point of view. So therefore, should that then be subsequently sufficient from a benefit payment point of view to make something a member benefit versus a death benefit? And I think, similarly to what we previously spoke about interdependency, I think we're going to see that once there's a significant amount of tax involved in one of these transactions, somebody's going to challenge that concept of when did this transaction occur, not when did the member die.
And how well the documents that you have in the suite of events that are occurring. So by that I talk about the deed itself, maybe the pension, so the construct of those documents, the commutation, whether it's in part or full. All of that body of evidence is really information that should be submitted as part of that determination. That's what I found quite interesting in that ruling is that the ATO is very clear that it does come down to your governing rules and documentation. Yet when the application for the private binding ruling's been done, it says, well, we've assumed here that this sort of stuff does or doesn't occur. You need to make it abundantly clear that this is what ends up transpiring. You end up with a debtor-creditor relationship or something that says, no, the request has occurred. We now have moved on from, or we can't get to the fact that it's a death benefit. Yeah, there might be some timing issues, but documentation becomes absolutely key.
Yeah, and look, and I think you and I have spoken about this before, Aaron, where we reference back to the early days of excess non-concessional contributions. And so many a practitioner rushed out and put some constructive trust commentary within their deeds to say that this amount of money is held on constructive trust and it's not a contribution until it's proven otherwise. And the ATO largely deemed those clauses within deeds to be inefficient, ineffective. And so, if people are going to go to the trouble of amending their governing rules to differentiate between a member and a death benefit, will we see a similar outcome? And so I think we sort of have to, obviously get your processes in place as early as possible, but you can't necessarily dictate when somebody's going to pass away either.
Yeah, and ultimately it's going to come to the form in which that death benefit's paid. I think the cash sort of payment speaks for itself, and again, we don't know with that information the form in which that death benefit's paid as a final, interim, and final, and so forth. But it is an area in its infancy in terms of that guidance where we're seeing these come very regularly now. So the importance of that documentation, looking at the decisions, and then therefore I think we're going to see more case law come out into this in the not too distant future as well.
Absolutely.
All right, well, once again, thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the Feeling Smarter show. Tim, we'll see you next week.
See you then, Aaron.
Excellent. Bye for now.